You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Monster House presents.
It's actually quite unlike anything we've ever seen before.
A giant, hairy creature, part ape, part man.
In Loch Ness, a 24-mile-long bottomless lake in the Highlands of Scotland. It's a creature known as the Loch Ness Monster.
Monster Talk.
Welcome to Monster Talk, the science show about monsters. I'm Blake Smith.
And I'm Karen Stolzno.
Hey there, Monster Talkers. Karen's away on business for a bit, and I had a chance to snag an interview that couldn't wait. So she's not going to be in the next couple of episodes, but she will be back soon. Now, what follows is the first of a two-part chat with friend of the show, paleontologist Darren Naish. Darren hosts the TetZoo blog, and he just dropped a really great comprehensive wrap-up of the Dogman phenomenon. You'll want to read the whole thing, of course, and I've linked to it in the show notes. Also, the indie monster movie company, Small Town Monsters, has released their 2018 documentary, The Beast of Bray Road, on YouTube, so you can check that out for free as well, and we'll talk about that in the interview. And that's linked in the show notes. Darren and I were able to talk for a full hour this week, so first we'll be looking at Dogman, and next week we'll continue the conversation and look at the state of the whole field of cryptozoology. This conversation with Darren is one I've been having with multiple people online, and I hope to eventually do some kind of roundtable, but I really appreciate Darren taking the time to share his thoughts, so tune in for that next week.
Monster Talk.
Well, Darren, I know we have limited time. That's my fault for having a day job. You've got one too now. Is that something you can talk about, or is that a secret?
I work for the Natural History Unit at the BBC, which is a fantastic job. And I've worked since about 2018 making TV shows. Can't say what I'm doing right now, but in the past I've been involved in the making of Prehistoric Planet, which was released on Apple TV Plus. So get to hang out with Sir David Attenborough and Jon Favreau and many other people.
That's fantastic.
And, doing that's my full-time job. But then in the background, like an idiot, I try and do research and publish books and get technical papers out there, and obviously still blog at Tetrapod
Yeah. Well, that's actually why we're talking today. Now, Dogman's been on my radar for a while, and I've been meaning to do something deep on it, but you beat me to it, and I thought, how efficient I could have you on, and we could talk about the same stuff I wanted to talk about, but you've done all the hard work.
That's very kind of you to say. Scratch the surface, really.
Well, it's interesting because there's so many different ways to slice this up, and part of what I want to talk about today is, the different sort of categories and ways to approach this topic. But yeah, I've been following Dogman for a while, and I got to meet Linda Godfrey, and I got a real sort of vibe for. In fact, if you think about it, our show started kind of as a response to Monster Quest, and Monster Quest sort of ended famously with a Dogman episode, which actually I think is one of their best episodes, which is kind of sad. But let's talk about it. So, Dogman currently having a real surge in popularity. What's going on with Dogman?
Yeah. I've been thinking for a long time that you can't move within monster research or cryptozoology without hearing people talk about Dogman. As if you are in the right Facebook groups and if you interact with the right inverted commas, scare quotes around people on social media, then it's there all the time. And I've been saying for a while to colleagues who aren't in this world that you do realize that it's not okay. The cryptozoology, monster research these days is Bigfoot, Yeti, Nessie, they're popular as ever. But then Mothman is in the top 5 and Dogman. And then you have to explain to people what Dogman is. And it's this is the thing that a section of the community is thinking about a lot, talking about a lot. And I get the impression that this might be way off, but it's something that's surprisingly high, like 1 in every 20 kind of North American monster reports of the sort of Bigfoot type genre are Dogman reports.
Wow.
If you listen to the sort of podcasts, look at what YouTubers put out who cover this stuff, and Dogman is there all the time. It started out as the Michigan Dogman, obviously kind of related to the phenomenon in Wisconsin as well. So it's an animal of a creature of the Midwest, but then it kind of expanded to be all North America. And then such is the popularity of monster research these days that it doesn't take long for Spanish-speaking people to start reporting it from Spanish-speaking parts of the world, which kind of makes sense. If there's a thing in North America, it's going to be in Spanish-speaking North America, and then Central America and South America, and then the Europeans. We love getting into this stuff. We love pretending that we've got Bigfoot here in places like the UK and elsewhere in Europe, and likewise for Dogman. Dogman is now, believe it or not, or maybe this is not surprising at all, that there's now kind of like a British bunch of people that are claiming that they Dogman sightings in the UK. So,
well, I think he's equally biologically plausible there as here. That's fair. So what are we talking about? What is a Dogman for listeners who somehow have managed to listen to this show and not hear of it before?
So I've just published this article where I decided in the end to use the term werewolf in the title of the article as a kind of hook to get people in, because basically we are talking about the dog-headed humanoid of popular lore. We are talking about an animal the size of a large person, maybe 6 foot tall, and with a human-like physique, maybe with a tail, maybe with dog-like feet, so with the ankles high up off the ground, not flat on the ground like in animals like us. And you're talking about a giant head, so a giant dog-like head. You really are talking about the werewolf of popular
cinematic,
cinematic type, yeah. And on the one hand, so we do have this idea. It is mentioned every time the topic of Dogman / American werewolf is discussed. People say, well, this idea has been around since forever. The cynocephaly, the dog-headed monster or creature of mythology, has been around.
Christopher, right? Yeah.
Well, there's a whole bunch of them.
Exactly. Among others, yeah.
Yeah, they go all the way back into Greek and Roman mythology. There are many tales of dog-headed humanoids that are sometimes connected to the underworld, and in the broadest take on this kind of discussion, you could argue that this goes hand in hand with the entire concept of therianthropy, the whole idea that humans can transmogrify, can turn into other animal forms, and that we've always, for as long as humans have existed, we've had this idea of hybrids or sort of intermediates between humans and other animals. And I say that we've had this forever because, of course, we've actually got claimed pieces of rock art from Paleolithic era rock art, tens of thousands of years old, that depicts human, non-human animal mix and match kind of creatures.
Mashups,
yeah. So on the one hand, it's like, has the concept always been there? It's not an invention of 20th century cinema or whatever. It's always been there. But then we have this very surprising modern resurgence in the American Midwest, but starting in Wisconsin, thanks to the efforts of researcher, author, artist, cartoonist Linda Godfrey. And I think that's kind of where we should concentrate. That's like kind of your grounding. That's your flag pointing. Yeah.
Yes, that's your ground zero for Dogman. So let's talk about Linda. And she started collecting these stories. What would we say is case zero here? What are our early sort of Dogman sightings that bring this into modernity?
Yeah, so we should say to start with, Linda sadly died in 2022, and she was very, very well liked. Seems to, I never met her or corresponded with her.
She was extraordinary. Yeah, she was very likable. She was just a very friendly, likable lady.
Yeah. So R.I.P. Linda Godfrey. But at some point, I'm no expert on her life history, but I believe she was working as a journalist and/or cartoonist for local newspapers in Wisconsin, in the vicinity of a town called Elkhorn, which is not too far from Milwaukee and Chicago, about 100-ish miles from both of those cities. And I don't know, I can't remember how, or I don't know how, she picked up on this set of stories. This is late 1980s, where people were claiming to have seen a dog-headed humanoid, the kind of creature we've been describing. The reports all came from the vicinity of Bray Road, which is a long road in the town of Elkhorn. Elkhorn's a small town. I think it's less than 10,000 people live there. It's a relatively rural area, so farms, pretty open landscape. I don't mean open desert-like. I mean, not hilly and not mountainous.
Yeah. And you can, and I have done this many times, you can go to Google Maps and sort of virtually drive down the road there and see what we're talking about.
I haven't done it many times. I haven't done it once. Maybe I should.
You should do that. It is, as you say, flat and open. So, yeah. Right.
And she somehow picked up on the initial story. I think it's 1989, and it came from, she actually got it, Linda got it off another freelance journalist, a woman called Linda Callum, who has sometimes been mentioned as an anonymous source, but in other things, the Small Town Monsters made a movie about the beast of Bray Road, or the Bray Road beast, this year, and she was mentioned by name in that, so I think it's fair to put her on record. She had found from a local bus driver, I assume of a school bus, a woman called Pat Lester, of these, like Dogman type creatures. Lester was relaying accounts that came from her daughter, Laurie Andreezy. And basically that is your ground zero report. That's where it starts. I think this is 1989. There's a suggestion of a couple of other accounts that come from maybe 87, 88. Then Andreezy's neighbor, we're talking about teenage kids here.
Yeah.
Andreezy's like next door neighbor also has a sighting, and it's from Halloween 1991. And this is one where I first started. This is when I read about this sighting. This is the one where I'm thinking, I'm not sure this is entirely zoologically.
It's a quandary. On Halloween, you have on the one hand the night when it's so easy for the spirits and the supernatural to come into our world, and also when a lot of people who are not spirits dress up as though they were. So it's very confusing for everyone, I'm sure.
Totally, for sure. Did I say Doris Gibson? That's the teenage neighbor of Laurie Andreezy. So Andreezy has a sighting herself. Teenage neighbor Doris Gibson also has sightings this Halloween 1991. One involves thinking that she has hit a creature with a car and is pursued by it. And this actually happened supposedly at two different points during that Halloween night. So we've got a small number of reports that involve a school bus driver who learns about this off like school kids, and school kids say that other school kid friends of theirs are seeing this creature. And the other accounts moving forwards into the early 90s, literally up to 91, 92, they also all involve young people. They sometimes involve groups of kids, some as young as 10 or 11. There's this 1992 sighting by a high school student called Tom Brichter, who, again, has got one of these scary stories involving thinking he's hit a creature with his car, and he then sees the animal moving around among corn, which is, that's a useful guide to how tall it is. Ripe corn, so the creature's head is above the height of the corn.
Ooh, that's quite tall. Yeah, if the rain's been good. Yeah,
exactly. So we're talking. So that's our initial set of reports. School kids, Bray Road, latest 80s, early 90s. Now, part of the story that Linda Godfrey liked to tell is that she spoke to I think Bray Road is in a part of Wisconsin called Walworth County. She talks to the Walworth County Animal Control Officer, a guy called John Frederickson. He's aware of these reports. She's doing her due diligence as a reporter, I guess. And Frederickson has got, this is a famous part of the story, it's been reenacted in all the documentaries that cover this. He's got a little, card manila envelope, folder rather, that says werewolf on it, and he's written about these werewolf sightings. And as Godfrey herself said, many times, when a county official has got a file that says werewolf on it, well, that in itself is news.
Yeah.
And I want to say two things about John Frederickson's involvement, because of course when we hear that a county official, someone working for the government, has got like a werewolf folder, it's like, oh man, this is serious. This got real, right? That's the kind of spin on it that Godfrey sort of conveyed in her writings and interviews. But in the new Small Town Monsters movie, they have some really nice interview with Frederickson, and with all due respect to him, he actually comes across as, he doesn't come across as the most skeptical guy, put it that way. He 2 minutes into the interview, he's talking about he is putting the sightings that he's aware of, he's casting them immediately within the way that paranormalists kind of like to imply that, is this something to do with like the demonic, the satanic?
Yeah.
Is it some kind of like connection to like other universes, the dark spirits coming through? He's going there straight away. So I'm like, John Frederickson, I'm not sure you were maybe someone else in that position wouldn't necessarily be so quick to label a file werewolf.
Yeah, it is. We've talked before on the show about how that the idea of government, big government, is it's sometimes treated as a monolith, but it's not. It's made up of people, and they have all kinds of different interests. And this guy, I haven't seen the new documentary, but Small Town Monsters did one a while back, and he was in that as well. So I don't know if this is new footage or the old, but yeah, he comes across as being interested in occultism, and it felt very satanic panic to me. And, he's the right age to have already been heavily influenced by that.
The Small Town Monsters movie the version I saw was uploaded to YouTube this year. But
it might be the original. Okay, yeah, which would have been, I think, from 2017 or 2018. Okay.
I should check on that.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think in my back channel conversations with other monster people, I think someone mentioned that he had put them out where you don't have to pay. You could actually see these older movies. So that may be what this is. But you're right. And I think when I was at Monster, what was it? I was at Crypticon with Jeb Card, and golly, that must have been 2018. We watched that. And we were both struck by the occult turn. It was very surprising, because up until that point, I had not actually heard very much of the occult side of it. And so seeing it framed that way, it fits into Jeb's research quite nicely. So
exactly, that's where this goes. And I got some really great take on this from Jeb, because part of my justification for writing about Dogman was, you can't find many people that are interested in the more academic or scientific side of cryptozoology that really find much interest in writing about Dogman, because it's obvious that I'm kind of paraphrasing an imaginary person here, but it's obvious this isn't really a zoological mystery. But I kind of like to approach these things as, well, there are people that, there are some people that are interested in this stuff that are framing it that way. They're saying, maybe this is, an undiscovered species. Maybe there are human-sized bipedal canid-like animals. Maybe there is some kind of like ungodly hybrid, or maybe there's, mutant dogs. I'm not endorsing any one of those hypotheses, but there are some people who literally are proposing those as possibilities, as possible explanations for it, and so we can evaluate all those ideas. We can show why they don't really stand up. And Godfrey herself, put forward all of those ideas in the various books and articles that she published on Dogman. But what was favoured by her and by most of the other people that have written about it and who talk about Dogman, the American werewolf in general, is they are generally pushing the idea that it is paranormal, that it's satanic, and they're seeing I don't want to overuse the term framing, but they are framing this creature as if this is another one of these indications that all those science guys just aren't seeing the big picture here. They're not getting the fact there's so much more to this world than we currently understand. There's portals where there's things coming through from other realms. That is clearly quite a popular idea among people who are interested in this stuff. Promote it as if it's real, reject much of the skeptical kind of pushback to these things, and it doesn't take much investigation for you to find links that people are promoting. So Godfrey finds out, I'm not sure exactly where she got it from. It's a really interesting case. This alleged story from the 1930s, and this is another classic Dogman, Wisconsin Dogman. Technically the term Dogman goes to the Michigan Dogman, and the creature in Wisconsin is initially the Beast of Bray Road, or the Bray Road Beast. But they do become conflated. They are regarded as kind of the same, air quote, species within a short time. And she finds out about this alleged 1930s Wisconsin account, which is reported by an author and editor called Joe Shackleman. And he says that in 1958, his dad, Mark Shackleman, who is obviously no longer around, told him about this 1936 account. And this is the famous Gadara creature. So Mark Shackleman was working as a night watchman at I think it's called St. Coletta School of Exceptional Children. Sounds like a sort of X-Men college or something, which it wasn't. I think it was mental health clinic, something along those lines. And it's basically a story about Mr. Shackleman on two different occasions observing this creature that kind of conforms to the Dogman description. It's large, 6 foot-ish tall. It's got a dog-like head, pointy ears. This one doesn't have a tail. And Joe, so that's the son Joe, drew it based on his father's recollection. And Joe's obviously a pretty good artist. It's got some really interesting features. One of them is it's plantigrade. It's got feet like a person. It doesn't have the dog-like feet. So, this doesn't sound exactly the same as the Dogman encounters, the other ones. And it's got strongly flexed wrists. Its hands are kind of like at a 90-degree angle to its forearms, which is an interesting trait, I think. And it's supposed to be scratching at an indigenous burial mound. There are burial mounds created by the Hopewell, the Hopewell culture. And supposedly the creature is heard to make an utterance, a kind of like growl, which Shackleman described as sort of like, it sounds like a proto-language, Gadara. And I think that if you hear a creature make a sound and it sounds like Gadara, that's just the way that you might like people describe frogs, like the bullfrog saying juggarum, juggarum. It's kind of like, it's just a way of describing the sound. It doesn't necessarily mean that frogs have got any connection with the history of alcohol. And the Gadara term, I reckon that's the same thing. It's just his, if this really happened, of course,
sure,
that's his best attempt to describe the sound. But because, of course, people of European ancestry are generally thinking of things in terms of, European culture, a Christian culture, immediately, I think people, Linda Godfrey and others, have immediately recognized, Gadara, that term is actually used in one of the New Testament stories in the Bible. Gadara is a place where Jesus Christ is meant to have performed an exorcism. It's the story where I think it's the Gadarean swine, where Jesus exorcises these demons. They come out of people or a person, I can't remember, and they go into the swine.
Yes,
and
I am legion. They go into a herd of swine. Yeah,
and the swine then all leap into the river and drown themselves. And so the fact that a werewolf / Dogman type creature is saying something connected, according to this interpretation, connected to the Bible and to exorcism, well, you can imagine people have leapt all over this. They're like, this confirms that there is this like connection to the Christian mythological view of the world, that maybe Dogman is connected to the underworld and Satanism and demons, and is it actually a demonic entity? And it's the reason it was saying Gadara is because it didn't want to be exorcised itself. I don't know, but that is the connection that you've got pretty early on in the books and articles that talk about this.
So as a paleontologist, science-trained individual, why do you think it's fairly safe to dismiss the idea that Dogman could be a real biological entity?
Yeah. Now, how do you put this? Because in the article I wrote, I said that my bias is that I just can't believe that Dogman is real. But bias isn't the right term. We can be pretty confident if you accept a rationalized sort of scientific view of the universe. We can be pretty confident that all of us think there are new animal species to find. That's not controversial. We've all heard this many times before. But in a stretch of the world like the whole of North America, or even if we just want to restrict it to the Midwest of the United States, it's not impossible that you're going to find a new frog or a new freshwater fish, possibly a new species of vole. But no, I'm sorry, it is absolutely not on the cards that there is a 2 meter tall dog-headed humanoid, an actual mammal awaiting discovery. If we look at this in terms of what evidence we would want to sort of satisfy ourselves scientifically, do we have anything that lends credence to this as a sort of scientific idea? Do we have any bones or scraps of skin or DNA? No, we don't have anything like that. We don't have any footprints that are unexplained from a big animal of this kind. We don't have any evidence of any kind. We don't even have any suggestive photos, although actually bit of a tangent we could go on there. But there just isn't any evidence that would lead you to think that there's anything here, and there's certainly nothing in the way of anything even mildly persuasive. So I think it's fair to say, I don't think it's too rejection-y, too knee-jerky to say Dogman ain't real. And there isn't really.
Well, it is funny because Brian Regal, I think the first time he was on Monster Talk, which was fairly early, was he had been doing a lecture talking about how Darwin killed the werewolf, basically arguing that once you showed the progression of species over time and speciation over time in the fossil record, that the idea of something just shifting and becoming a different thing altogether made no biological sense. And it was a real big impact on sort of science dismissing the idea of these transformations happening. And I'm not saying there's no people who were saying that Dogman is literally a werewolf, but werewolves have been part of culture, as we just covered in a recent episode, since Babylonian times. I mean, for a long, long time, or definitely since the Romans, at least, because we have really good werewolf stories from Rome. But Dogman's new, and I guess it seems like it feels like folklore can maybe be a better way of explaining this. We've talked about Slender Man. Slender Man was made up. We know exactly where Slender Man came from. It doesn't stop people from reporting Slender Man sightings and like life-threatening implications therefrom. And same thing with black-eyed kids. We know where black-eyed kids come from. And yet they spread, and people report them as having really seen them. And some of these seem to be people telling stories, which is a thing people do. Some people, I think, really think they're seeing these things, which is not exactly the same thing, but I think there's still natural explanations for that. And some people like make-em-ups. I think we have to admit that too.
I think the same deal with Dogman. I think that we've always got this idea with us, throughout the whole of the 20th century and beforehand, that such creatures they're an idea. Nobody's taking seriously the suggestion that they really are, dog-headed humanoids are out there walking around. But the idea that they're a thing somewhere within our mythological view of the universe exists. And at some point, if someone wants to have some fun and start claiming that they've seen it, and then someone else does the same thing, it's sort of reinforced by the fact, many people have made the point now that early 2000s, you had a few werewolf movies that kind of sort of had fun with the idea that such creatures did exist. Dog Soldiers, I think, is 2002. There's a movie called Ginger Snaps with a humanoid werewolf in it, about 2000.
I love both those films. Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously in the 80s and 90s, you got The Howling and its various sequels. I think there's 4 sequels to The Howling.
Yeah.
Or 4 Howling films. So I think it's some kind of like fun little bit of evolving folklore which is spreading around among young people in this part of the world where it feels kind of right. It feels kind of fun to have it. So yeah, in that ways it is quite similar to Slender Man. And the fact that people who are already committed to belief in Bigfoot and related phenomena, the fact that they've started to share those stories as well, I think sometimes that is because people have had unusual encounters. They have seen glimpses of weird things in the woods, and have creatures like this on the brain has fed into the phenomenon.
Yeah, I think we didn't talk about the Gable film, and I guess I would say refer listeners to read your article, which I think is going to be the overarching theme of this first half of this, if we get to keep talking for the rest of this. but I think read the article because your coverage of the Gable film is great. But as a wrap up to this first part, I want to ask, so given that this is, God, I don't know why I'm always compelled to leave a little hole for possibility. There's nothing 1,000% against the idea of having an upright, dog-like creature, but that there's just no supporting evidence for it. But given all of that, and the fact that it fits so much with folklore and psychology and these other, what do you think is the best way to academically approach a topic like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I guess you would. It would involve. Yeah, it's okay. It's worth saying at this point that nobody has actually done the proper analytical work that you would need to do to really study a phenomenon like this, because that involves detailed interview, sit down, long-term interview, get the collection of interview data from the witnesses, their friends, their backgrounds. What were you thinking of? What inspired you to, not necessarily asking them specifically about their claimed sighting, but what was sort of cultural setting that they were in at the time? We know from a few other cases around the world, there have been studies on people that believe in human-wolf transitions in Mongolia. There's also some studies that have been done on the people that believe they turn into tigers in parts of Southeast Asia, I think Sumatra. That has... Basically, you are collecting like a very living folklore from people who truly believe that this is a valid part of like the way the world works. So, are we actually seeing this is not a difficult idea for us to accept. It seems ridiculous to say this in 2024, but it's not a difficult thing for us to accept that there might actually be people in modern day US and other countries all around the world who really do believe that this is actually a valid part of the way the universe works. Those of us who come at things from a skeptical angle, we say, of course, it's silly. Nobody really believes in werewolves. Nobody really believes in Slender Man. But well, that's not true. There are people who, there's no reason for us to regard it as a real thing, as a sort of flesh and blood thing in the world, but there could well be people who actually do believe.
You're talking about ethnography and religious studies and the anthropological views. So not biology,
Definitely not.
But yet it's a valid part of the human experience to experience monsters. And so what does that mean? I guess that's what you're getting at. And it's where I've increasingly landed is only a multidisciplinary approach really captures the whole field. And, of course, my dream is still to have some kind of multidisciplinary academic conference on monsters at some point. Oh, I want that to be real.
Well, maybe one day.
One day.
So, that's exactly where I'm going with this. Yeah, you would need to collect all this ethnographic data. There's definitely something worthy of analysis here, and it's not a biological phenomenon, but the way in which these people, these witnesses, and these people sharing these stories, the way they're seeing the world, are they actually believing that that they are living in a world where Dogman or / werewolves are real? So no one's done that work. There's no reason why it couldn't be the subject of a technical paper or a bunch of them. We're still in the early stages of people actually even studying, subjects with a far longer pedigree, like Bigfoot. There's still a lot of socioanthropological work that just hasn't been done yet. It's like the relevant people with the right way to approach it are only just getting sort of invested in the study of it.
It's funny. I had occasion to pick up my copy of On the Track of Unknown Creatures by Bernard Heuvelmans, and I was looking for something, and I realized, wait a minute. And this makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't it? But in the same way that Dogman, you've got people trying to go back and find earlier cases, because we all know monsters don't appear out of nowhere. They have to have, science is embedded enough that we go, oh, well, there has to be a longer history because things don't just start appearing, right? But there's no Bigfoot in On the Track of Unknown Creatures because it didn't exist yet. It's just not there. There's all kinds of really interesting missing animals, including the Yeti, but there's no Bigfoot. And I find that really funny. It's just kind of one of those reminders that pattern of seeing a monster, having a flap, and then people coming in and building the backstory, the rich backstory, is just part of the process. So, yeah. I
agree. Yeah, which creatures he did and didn't include in that book is interesting, given that in his 1986 list of cryptids, which we've spoken about before. Mm-hmm. It's by 1986, obviously Bigfoot is on his list as a valid species awaiting discovery, but not in 1950. 1955.
I think the English version I have is like 57 or something like that. But
it's 58. Yeah. So the French one is 55.
Yeah, there you go. So he just missed it. Like if he'd waited a little longer, he'd have gotten it. But yeah, that's so true.
Monster Talk.
You've been listening to Monster Talk, the science show about monsters. I'm Blake Smith.
And I'm Karen Stolzno.
You just heard part 1 of my 2-part conversation with paleontologist Darren Naish about Dogman. Be sure and tune in next week for the second half of this chat, where we'll be discussing the state of cryptozoology. Monster Talk theme music is by Peach Stealing Monkey. Hey, what's Dogman's favorite holiday? Halloween.
This has been a Monster House presentation.